Hello and welcome back to the garden. It has gotten so much warmer since the last time you were here. So I have been outside working every chance I get. The greenhouse is still full, but some of it is new because a lot of what was in here has gotten planted. And so what I thought we would do today is a full tour of the cutting garden. So I just popped into the greenhouse first to check on things and make sure it's not too hot. It's about 27 in here with the door and the window wide open, which is borderline too warm, but I'm keeping an eye on things. So let's have a look at these before we go take a look at the cutting garden. Now, my Lisianthus trays up on the top shelf look surprisingly good. This is only my second year, I think, growing these from seed. Some of them look really great. Some of them are still pretty small, but that's okay. But look at the end of this tray. This is significantly better than I did last year. I'm really excited. Because it gets a little hot in here, I'm a little concerned that some of these are rosetting, but I'm not too worried. I have a backup plan for those. Shelf number 2, I have planted some of my Bell's Violet. We'll see those in a moment outside. I have some sweet peas, some stock in soil blocks that need to be planted outside shortly, a few more sweet peas and some calendula. And then down on the ground, that tray, we have cress, we have Chabot carnations and some, what are those? Bachelor's buttons. We have some larkspur, some snapdragons, and some more lavender. And that's only because I have planted a lot of these already, and those are just the leftovers. Some very beautiful looking statice, Chinese forget-me-nots. I have blue and pink in there. It's hard to tell what's in this tray. These are just leeks. These ones are asparagus seedlings, and this is Clarkia or Godetia. These need to be pinched and put into the ground ASAP as well. I have a shelf in here just for a little bit more space. We have apricot status, and then the second tray is Seeker Blue, I think. Yep, Seeker Blue. And then there's the rest of my lavender. Quite a bit of lavender because that's one of the things that I will be selling at the farmer's market. And the Ranunculus planted into the ground is starting to do really, really well. These are the ones that I started in the fall, and they're looking really good, but honestly, I think the ones I started indoors in February are bigger. So I'm not sure I'll be doing this again, but it could be the soil in here as well. So that is the tiny greenhouse. Just as I came out, I saw a gorgeous butterfly. First butterfly of the season. I can't get close enough to tell what it is, but that's amazing. So I think we're going to start on the far end of the cutting garden and then work our way back in. This is where I had some fall planted larkspur. So those 2 rows were overwintered. I started them in plug trays and planted them out in the fall, and this is about the size that they went through the winter. So they are just starting to put on some new growth. And this third row over here has been planted for 2 days. So that will be a good comparison of fall planted versus spring planted. Row number 2 has been filled with snapdragons. We have 20 white, 20 peach, and I forget. There's a third variety back there. Row number 3, yarrow. I could stand to come in here and clean this up. Honestly, it's going to be fine either way. I don't really have to. These rows are somewhere in the 10 to 12 foot range. They are going to get longer as we clean up that area back there. We have about another 12 feet behind, but that is not a spring project. Row number 4, the Bells of Ireland. Not many, I don't use a ton of these. There's 4 by 4. There's only 16 plants here, and I think they have doubled in size in the 3 days since I planted them. And those are at the end of these fall planted carnations. We were looking at these 2 rows a couple of times in videos this spring. I had found tiny little shoots at the base of my Rebeckia, and this is Sahara Rebeckia. There is some Indian Summer over in the next row, but this one is Sahara, and then farther back we have Cherry Brandy, and these are all coming back. I wasn't sure if these have been reseeded or the plants themselves have come back, but these shoots are in fact coming off of the root, and they're doing this on almost every single plant. So these were not seedlings I planted in the fall. These were plants that I put in early summer last year, and I got a harvest. I was harvesting off of them, and they have come through the winter and will likely be even stronger this year. So I'm really excited by that. We are zone 6, by the way. So I plan to come through here and clean these up just a little bit now that the weather's warmed up. But that is very exciting. So the only annoying thing about this garden is I didn't really plant complete rows. So my Rudbeckia only goes halfway down each row. And that means that I do still have a little bit of space to plant. The end of these 2 rows are both empty, except for those grass roots that need to come out. So I think the plan for these 2 rows is to plant the stock that I have in soil blocks and then the Clarkia or Godetia. Since I don't have a ton of either of those, I think they'll fill in those spaces nicely. So, and then here is some green. This is Ranunculus. I have Ranunculus mustard and cream and a little bit of Pauline. And the Pauline is much smaller, which is a shame because I don't have a whole lot of that color. The foliage is also a little bit darker, but Pauline is a very dark purple color, so that might be why, which is interesting. These Ranunculus have not had to be covered for at least the last 3 nights. Our temperatures have gone way, way up, not only during the day, but at night as well. We've had a couple of very light frosts the last few nights, but that's been it. And during the day, it's anywhere between 15 and 20 degrees Celsius, which I think is in the 60 to 68 degree Fahrenheit range. It's about that right now, but it feels warmer. I think I'm gonna have to take this jacket off. This is obviously not gardening clothes. Today is a teaching day for me, not a gardening day, but I had a couple hours and the weather outside is just perfect. So I thought it would be a good opportunity to film this little tour for you since I'm not actually busy working in the garden today. So not only do I have Ranunculus over on the left side of the greenhouse, but over here in these raised beds. The first one is cram-packed, and you can see how the shadow of the house hits, but it is just at the time of year where it is clearing this garden. In the winter, this pretty much all stays shaded during the day. These upturned pots was just to hold the frost cloth, which we don't need anymore. But there's the Ranunculus about 3, I'm trying to remember how long ago I planted this. I think it's been 3 weeks. And there's new growth. It seems really happy. I think I'm about 2 to 3 weeks earlier on the Ranunculus this year than I was last year. Here are the tulip beds. Now I have about a bed and a half, close to 2 beds of tulips. I had 1,060 some bulbs that I planted in these raised beds last year. And I just went back and watched that video because I had had some damaged bulbs and I wasn't quite sure which ones they were. You can really see now which bulbs are the early flowering and which ones are the later flowering. Over there in that one too. I don't see buds yet, but I am guessing that we should have tulips within 3 weeks. So I have been watching these tulips really closely, trying to figure out when they are going to bloom. And 4 weeks from this Sunday, today is Thursday, 4 weeks and 3 days is Mother's Day. And I'm not sure, but I think we really might hit the nail on the head there with that one. I think we might be able to get tulips for Mother's Day. But the ones who have first dibs are my CSA clients. I sold 10 bouquet subscriptions for 6 weeks. Only 10 because I think that's a manageable number, and that is a little more than I had last year. They're gonna get first dibs, and then anything that's left over will hopefully be sold for Mother's Day. So I had, I think, 9 wholesale varieties of tulips. I bought boxes of 100. 3 of those had bug damage in them. Now, luckily I went back and looked and they did give me a full refund for those 3 boxes plus 1 box of daffodils. But I fished through and I think I was maybe able to salvage a dozen or 2 of each of those. I think one of the boxes I had to get rid of completely. But I did salvage a few, and there are some daffodils, Acropolis daffodils, which are gorgeous. And luckily I was able to salvage a few of those. They're in the second bed. Here's the second bed of tulips. You can see the difference between the varieties, right? There's 3 or 4 rows here and there, and then these ones get kind of thin. I suspect these are maybe the ones that were damaged and the few that I salvaged, but that could also be over here. There, so these would be the Acropolis daffodils. This whole half of the bed might be just the leftover ones that were damaged, but I have a few things in here that look different too. So I wish I had taken more careful notes because this foliage is much smaller than these ones over here. Oh, look, there's a bud. But then there's some random tulips over there too. So I think this is just going to have to be a wait and see, and then we'll know exactly what I planted. Here is bed number 4, and this one is purely daffodils that were planted here in the fall of 2021. So this will be their second season blooming here. And we have buds. And it's pretty obvious as we go by which ones are going to be the first to bloom, and that would be those ones over here. So I might not know exactly what tulips I have planted over there, but I managed to find the list of daffodils, and including how many of each variety and how tall they get, that I planted here a year and a half ago. So looking at this one, which I think goes this way, yeah, that makes sense. These ones are Ice King. They are big and they are fairly early flowering. And a lot of these are more specialty variety too. Now the Ice King are the tallest, along with La Torche, which is 1, 2, this one over, really? Yeah, all right, so this is my other tallest variety, and it's not very tall right now, but it's also likely to bloom a lot later. So what we have here is Gardenia, and Electris, Ice King, and most of these clumps have at least 2 flowers coming off of them. Happy Smile, La Torche, Suncatcher, are there now, that's Pipit, Mount Hood, Original Poet, and those are by far the smallest, Original Poet. They are the shortest as well. Nope, they're not. Pipit, 8 to 12 inches, and then Original Poet is 12 to 14 inches tall. And then the last 2 rows are both Fragrant Thalia. I think I have a few of these by the greenhouse too. They are gorgeous. They are multi, if I remember them right, they have 2 or 3 flowers per head, maybe even more. And the daffodils will likely be blooming before the tulips. That's normally what happens, although with this heat coming up all of a sudden, I have a feeling we are going to get a lot of bulbs blooming all at once. And really that wouldn't be a bad thing. So there's our 3 beds of bulbs, all tulips and daffodils. And I do have one more bed over on this side. This is 4 by 10, I believe. And that is just garlic. So not officially part of the cutting garden. This is just where we had space to put it. This is the bed though that had all my dahlias in it last year. So I am standing right now at the edge of my driveway. So this is the first thing you see when you get out of the car, and it's just lovely. That just makes my heart happy. So I'm sure I missed a few things. We're walking between the Ranunculus and the tulip bed number 1. I have a few potted Ranunculus and anemones on the table. I think honestly I'm going to put those in some bigger pots just to decorate my front deck. They were just a few extras that didn't fit in the beds. So we do have stock and anemones planted into bulb crates, and the anemones look fairly happy. The stock not so much, but it's just something I wanted to try out. I planted this really early knowing that if the weather warmed up they could go into the ground, but if not, I planted them into these bulb crates just to see what would happen. So we may get some usable cuts on those. And if not, they will just decorate my house, and I won't be too upset about that. The little herb border in front of the greenhouse hasn't quite woken up yet, except for the chives and just a few snowdrops that I put in last year. So they're only flowering a little bit, but they're only in their first year. This is going to look really great in a couple of weeks' time. So there's the 7 rows we already had a look at, and we skipped the raised beds, but that's because there's not much to see here yet. We have the first 2 are full of lilies, and I've forgotten I stuffed a few leftover daffodils in there. I think these might be orange juice, I'm not totally sure. So we have 6 more daffodils. This bed is tarragon, and it is growing. There's some nice little shoots starting to come up. I do love tarragon, but I'm not going to sell that much, so these are going to go in my edible bouquets. This one is elephant garlic, which is starting to come up nicely. That one is full of oregano, which I'm still not sure what I'm going to do with. We have the saffron crocuses on this side, which are going to die back, and then we'll be able to use this bed for something else during the summer months. And then it looks like the feverfew has overwintered a second time. There are a couple of plants that are looking really, really good. I planted these in the fall of 2021. And most of the bed was looking quite rough, but most of the plants do have some new growth coming. up. So I did leave this as a bit of a trial to see if it would truly perennialize, as I've heard it can do in some spots. So that is still a wait and see on that one. And then this one is empty. I've just finished removing the chives and adding a little bit of compost, so that I will be able to plant as well. But other than those handful of spots, the cutting garden is officially full, and it is only the middle of April. Now last year I was calling this the upper garden. It was a bit of a mishmash of food and flowers, and this year I'm really going to try to keep this as a food garden. These rows are tarped because they're going to be the first ones to plant. But the very first row up against that little rock wall, I did overwinter some perennials. The evergreen scallions are growing really fast now, so I need to clean those up, and I'm actually going to harvest some to eat fairly shortly. But what we really want to have a look at are these. So I did mean to rake these and clean them up a little bit before I filmed, but I think I've showed these a couple of weeks ago, and if you watch that, you'll notice how much bigger they look. These are Aquilegias or Columbine. There are some delphiniums. So they've overwintered beautifully. There's another delphinium. These were all grown from seed last year, and you can see, I like this one. It has much darker foliage. These were seed gifted to me from a friend, and they were from her collection of double flowering columbines. So I have no idea what these are going to look like, but I'm hoping they'll be big, beautiful doubles. So there is a little cutting garden update for you today. It is April the 13th, and the garden is just getting going. So I'm gonna go water the greenhouse, and I'll leave you with some shots of some of the beautiful spring flowering perennials that I have in my landscape if you want to stick around to see them. And thank you so much for watching. I'll see you next time.